Hi everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. We're about to begin, so please go have quiet in the room.
Okay, good evening everyone. Welcome to Nesta. Brilliant to have so many people in the room. Welcome to those online as well. The eagle-eyed among you will notice that I am not Ravi Gurumurthy as billed. Apologies for that. My name's Madeleine Gabriel. I lead the Sustainable Future mission at Nesta, which focuses on decarbonising homes. For those not aware, Nesta is the UK's innovation agency. We use innovation to solve big social challenges. We've got 3 missions, one of which is home decarbonisation. We are absolutely thrilled to be joined this evening by Martin McCluskey MP, who is the Minister for Energy Consumers. Thank you, Martin. As many of you will know, the government published its much anticipated Warm Homes Plan in January. For those of us working in this sector, this was like our Christmas and birthday come at once. It's a really important policy update, major opportunity to accelerate the transition to clean, affordable home heating. The critical question now that is out is delivery. So how do we move forward from the policy to making it real? There are some open questions still in the plan that need to be met with practical solutions, so we'll have some chance to discuss that today. And of course, the context has shifted since the publication of the plan in January. We now have a war in Iran, the prospect of potentially another energy crisis on the cards. So it would be good to reflect on what difference that might make in the delivery of the Warm Homes Plan. And there'll be plenty of time for those questions today. The running order is that I'll pass over to the Minister in a minute for an overview of the plan for 5 to 10 minutes. Then we're going to have a fireside chat. We've got these wonderful microphones, so we might stand up and start singing and dancing, who knows? But we'll talk a little bit, and then I'll pass over to the audience for 20 or 25 minutes worth of questions from you. We'll be taking some questions online as well, so do keep thinking while we're talking about what you would like to ask and hear from the Minister on. Okay, so before any further ado, I'll pass over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Madeleine. I think these microphones, it really ages you depending on what you call them. Madeleine called them Spice Girls microphones, which I think really other people it's Madonna microphones, but hopefully we'll get through without bursting into song this evening. Look, thank you everyone for being here. The Warm Homes Plan was like birthdays and Christmases wrapped up into one. And for me, it was the opportunity to actually start talking about it and not doing what I spent a lot of time doing after I was appointed to this job in September, which was telling people it was coming soon. Spent a lot of time saying it's coming soon. So actually being able to stand in front of rooms of people and talk about the detail now is very welcome. And I want to just start off by thanking Madeleine and thanking Nesta for organising this event, for all the work that you're doing to drive forward the decarbonisation of our homes. There's so much that Nesta is doing, whether it's demystifying heat pumps by making it easier for people to actually go and see one in action in their area, or the crucial research that you're doing on the most effective energy saving tips, or the way you've helped heating engineers play their part in the clean heat revolution as well. It's all hugely appreciated, and not just by me, but by the many officials in DESNZ, some of whom are here tonight in this room. And I know you'll continue to play a pivotal role as we move forward in the delivery of the Warm Homes Plan. Before I get onto the specifics of what's in the plan, I want to talk about the values that underpin it, and in particular a word that may sound a little bit old-fashioned to some people in this room, but that word is duty. Because the government that I'm part of, that was elected in July 2024, was elected with a mandate for change and a duty to improve lives and tackle the structural issues that hold people back in this country and prevent them from realising their full potential. And in my role, it's my duty to tackle one of the biggest sources of structural inequality that we face in this country, and that's our housing stock. And in this sense, I see this government and the job that I'm doing is following in the footsteps of past Labour governments who saw it as their duty to give more working class people somewhere safe and comfortable to call home. And if you cast your mind back, if those of you who are fans of history in this room, to the very first Labour government, which sanctioned the construction of 500,000 homes in the Housing Act over 100 years ago, promising the first stage of social housing, much of it reserved for First World War veterans and their families. And now in the 2020s, the need for change is even greater. I know many of you here will be aware of this, but it's staggering to think that 40% of our homes in this country were built before the Second World War. So that means millions of people, including lots of people in social housing, living in ageing, poorly insulated properties, which are overwhelmingly heated by gas. So when gas costs spiked a few years ago following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it was, as it often is, the most vulnerable people in our society who paid the highest price. And as Madeleine alluded to, recent events in Iran and across the Middle East have shown that we will always be vulnerable to these shocks so long as we depend on fossil fuel markets to set our energy prices. The cost of energy bills, combined with the state of our housing stock, has trapped too many people in a miserable cycle of energy debt and fuel poverty, wasting their money on inefficiently heating their homes, unable to invest in the upgrades that will bring them relief. And if there's one statistic that sums up how that holds us back both socially and economically, it's this. British children miss more days of school due to illness caused by living in dank, damp homes than any EU country, including those with colder, longer winters than ours. So that's why it is our duty to fix this, and that's why last year we expanded the warm home discount to twice as many families. It's why we took action in the budget that we'll see the effect of in a few weeks' time when the price cap falls by 7% in April as a result of those decisions that were taken. And it's why in the Warm Homes Plan we're launching the biggest programme of home upgrades in British history. Now, I know that many of you in this room will know all about the Warm Homes Plan and we'll get into the details later, but I do want to restate the scale of its ambition. That 1924 Housing Act that I mentioned helped build 500,000 homes, and now we are planning to upgrade up to 10 times as many before 2030. £15 billion to upgrade our homes by the end of this Parliament and make them fit for the 21st century, with an offer for every household to help them access the clean heat technologies that will transform their energy use and save them hundreds of pounds a year. And as part of that, £5 billion of support will go directly to those on low incomes and in fuel poverty, who won't have to pay a penny for the home upgrades that will change their lives and break the vicious cycle that they're trapped in. In total, helping to lift up to 1 million households out of fuel poverty by 2030 through public investment and new minimum energy efficiency standards for both private and social landlords. Having published the plan earlier this year, we're now in flat-out delivery mode, and let me set out what that looks like. First, we are strengthening the supply chain to match the growing demand and ensure we have the skilled jobs that we need to deliver. Last year, we saw heat pump sales in the UK, with the record heat pump sales in the UK, with the number sold exceeding 100,000 annually for the first time ever, according to the Heat Pump Association. And we're supporting this growth by expanding the boiler upgrade scheme, funded with £2.7 billion to 2030. But there is a problem here. Though we have a strong presence in the heating supply chain and are the largest producer of residential gas boilers in Europe, less than half the heat pumps sold in the UK are made here. So part of the plan is putting this right, and we want to use this opportunity to create a whole generation of good quality jobs in our communities. That's why we're backing British manufacturing by investing a record £90 million through our heat pump investment accelerator competition, trebling previous investment, creating jobs and supporting our ambition that by 2035, 70% of heat pumps sold in this country will be made in this country. And beyond the factory floor, we're supporting the skilled jobs, the installers, the heat pump engineers, the retrofit professionals who will bring the Warm Homes Plan into people's homes. Because when I speak to industry, the same thing comes up time and time again, that they applaud our ambition, but worry about how we will secure the training and the skills we need to bring it about. So that's why we're taking direct action. We've increased funding for the heat training grant to £7 million per year until March 2029. We've set aside £8 million for the Warm Home Skills Programme to support training for solar and fabric installers and retrofit workers. And overall, we expect the Warm Homes Plan to support up to 180,000 additional jobs by the end of the decade. We've also established a new task force, which began work about 6 weeks ago, with the TUC alongside local government and civil society to help ensure those are good jobs, well paid, secure, and with fair working conditions. And as a Labour government, it should come as absolutely no surprise that we see it as our duty to put working people and their rights at the heart of sustainable economic growth that can benefit everyone. Second, we're setting up our Warm Homes Agency, a body with one purpose: to make the Warm Homes Plan happen. We've listened to industry and agree that we need to move on from the fragmented and confusing system that held this sector back. This will be a specialist body with technical expertise and focus, bringing together all the different organisations and schemes that currently exist and working alongside local businesses, local authorities and businesses to ensure these schemes deliver maximum value for money. This work will be backed by a reformed system of consumer protection, putting an end to the failure of accountability and regulation that we've seen in recent years and the harm that we've seen from the lack of it in recent years. And on the consumer side, the aim is to simplify the experience while providing a trusted source of advice and support, giving families more confidence to make the upgrades that they need. Before I wrap up, let me return quickly to that theme of duty, because this is also a personal duty for me. I grew up in the same 4-in-a-block ex-council flat that my grandparents moved into before the Second World War, a house that was built in 1925, and that flat provided the roof over the head of 3 generations of my family over the course of more than 70 years. It gave me, my dad, his 2 brothers, the best possible start in life, but also it changed with the times. So in the 1940s, and I was hoping to have a picture of this tonight, and unfortunately I don't have it, the block was bombed out during the Greenock Blitz, and we were marking the 85th anniversary of the Greenock Blitz this year, when some slightly misguided Luftwaffe bombers in search of shipyards mistook the reservoir behind my home for the River Clyde. And there's a great photograph, which again I should have brought this evening, with the whole back of that house ripped off, looking like the inside of a doll's house. But instead of demolishing that and all the homes around it, the local district council at that time in the war rebuilt that house along with countless other homes in my town, thanks to the ambition and the vision that they had. And a few years ago, when my mum was still alive and living in that same home, her entire block was refurbished, retrofitted and insulated using a government scheme. And I saw the direct impact of those upgrades, not just bringing down bills for families, but really renewing pride in their neighbourhood and showing that older housing stock, even those that had endured bombing raids and lived to tell the tale, could make a warm, safe home fit for the 21st century. And there's another lesson in that that programme that, you know, I occasionally tell this story at risk of, you know, the person involved hunting me down. When the programme was rolled out in that particular estate, there was one resident who refused to get her home upgraded and was actually on the front of the local paper, I think describing it as some form of communism. As soon as the rest of the development was retrofitted, and she talked, I understand from others that when she talked to her neighbours and discovered quite how much her bills had gone down by, within 6 months she was back at the door of the council asking for her home to be upgraded, which I think speaks to something that hopefully we'll have time to talk about this evening in terms of that locally based delivery. And it's not me or even some people in this room who are the best advocates for what we're trying to do. It's those people who actually can benefit from the programmes that we are rolling out and being able to tell their neighbours and friends the advantage of it. So, you know, that sense of pride and comfort that the people that I grew up next to are currently feeling is what I want hundreds of thousands of families up and down this country to feel. And that's what the Warm Homes Plan is ultimately all about. And I'm looking forward to working not just with Nesta, but with people in this room as we move forward into this critical delivery phase. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I was actually going to start by channeling my inner Claudia and asking you what brought you to Warm Homes, but you've covered that really well. I wondered if you could reflect, before we get into the detail of the plan and what comes next, on what the big strategic choices were that you made in developing the plan, and why were those choices made? So, give us the wider context. What could it have been, and why is it as it is?
I think the first place I would start with that is it's about having a long-term vision and a long-term strategy. And I should in answering this question, say I came into this at the very end of the policy making process, so I shouldn't sit here and claim all the credit. Miata Fambula, who did this job before me, did a absolutely incredible job of getting it to the point that she got it to before she moved on to MHCLG. And I think both her and Ed Miliband, the Secretary of State, they have a long-term vision for what they want to achieve through the Warm Homes Plan. We obviously developed this in opposition, and I think that the strategic call to say this is going to be something long-term is really important, because I hear from members of the industry, from installers, from retrofit companies, from all sorts of people about how short-term funding and short-term plans is unhelpful in terms of trying to get the system to deliver. So I think that's the first thing. But the second big strategic call we made, which actually did come later in the process, was around the emphasis on technology. We know how fast things have been changing over the last 10 years. We know that the technology that's available now will, in 5 years' time, there'll probably be even more advances that we can't imagine now. But we wanted to make sure that those technologies, like batteries, solar panels, heat pumps, that have been available for quite some time to people with deep pockets, were available to people who maybe wouldn't be able to reach into their own pockets to pay for them, which is why there was such an emphasis in the low-income schemes, that £5 billion, to make sure that people can take advantage of it, but also the consumer loans, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit more detail later. But those consumer loans allowing people who maybe want to invest in upgrading their home but can't afford the upfront cost, but now they can actually take advantage of that and take advantage of the savings. So I think the other two things that I would pick out, the long-term vision and the turn towards technology.
Thank you. And you referenced the situation in Iran and the Middle East in your opening remarks. What do you think that changes, if anything, about delivering this plan?
I think I wouldn't say it changes much. I think what it does is it emphasises the need to go even further and faster. And those of you who may have seen the Secretary of State on the media round on Sunday morning will have heard him talk about the Warm Homes Plan and some of those interviews and the need to go faster on this. And so in terms of what that means for the department, it means that already obviously delivery was absolutely critical, but I think we'll be looking to move faster on some of those areas of deployment where we can get technology to people more quickly, especially where that's going to reduce bills. But take a step back just from the Warm Homes Plan. Again, it emphasises why we absolutely need to move away from volatile oil and gas and why we need to move towards electrifying our economy. Half of all recessions that we've experienced in this country have been because of energy shocks. We're at a very early stage in this conflict, but we don't know where it will lead. But what we do know is it's already having an impact. For example, we had to announce £53 billion of support for people on heating oil yesterday, and obviously we'll keep other areas under review. But this, if nothing else, this should emphasise again why we need to move at pace to move ourselves away from oil and gas and onto renewable sources of energy where we can control the price and we can control the sources of energy.
Thanks, and I think pace is going to come up in the questions that we go through, and also I'm sure from the audience. On that, at a general level, I think I know that there was a lot of work that went into getting the Warm Homes Plan out, and you mentioned the promising people it was soon, and it taking a little while. I mean that was a big effort, and it's a really big milestone to have it published. But now we need to move into delivery. Is there a risk that it feels like it's done? And how do you keep the momentum going now you've got the policy to doing some of that granular stuff that is needed to put it into action?
The period of the waiting for the Warm Homes Plan, it felt at times a bit like waiting for Godot. That, and getting out of that, I think, has actually probably put a lot of energy behind not just myself, but also people in the department who are working on it, because we did spend a lot of time in those final few months where we were trying to wrap up, the final strands of policy, waiting for it to come. So I think now there's a lot of energy behind this, just in terms of, the architecture within the department to make sure that we keep driving this forward. We have a delivery stock take every 2 weeks now. I've got a dashboard that I've asked the department to give me that has right on the front page how close we are to the 5 million homes. We're right at the start. No spoilers, we're not very close yet, but confident that we're going to get there by the end of this Parliament. And so everyone in the department who is working on this is now absolutely focused on getting to that 5 million target. And I think what's different about the Warm Homes Plan versus maybe what government has done before is it's not just capital grant schemes for local authorities, it's not just single routes of delivery. We're delivering across a range of different areas, all of which are working in parallel. So it is a delivery challenge. You've got the consumer loans, you've got capital grants, you've got other areas. So it is a delivery challenge, but one I think the department's really stepping up to meet.
Brilliant, thank you. Let's dive into some of those areas. You've mentioned the consumer loans a couple of times. So what's going on? What can we expect to see? And where are we on consumer loans?
So we've set up the Green, the strategic partnership with the Green Finance Institute, which has brought round the table not just academics and experts in those areas, but also the high street lenders. So we've got representation on that from all of the major banks and finance providers you would expect to see around that table, because one of the things that I think I'm very clear on and the Secretary of State is as well is we need to make this as easy as possible for people to access and not just necessarily spinning up another government loan scheme as we've had in the past. We've learnt the lessons from what some previous governments have done on consumer loans. We're incorporating that into what we're planning and we're working alongside the lenders on that. It's still at an early stage, but we'll start public consultation on some of those elements within the next few months. But for me, it's about, go back to that point, how do we make this as easy as possible for people to access, and also how do we potentially leverage the funding that we are putting in, so the roughly £2 billion of financial transactions that are going into the consumer loans, to allow finance providers to potentially do even more with that. So, I'm not saying this is where we're going to end up. One of the things I am keen to understand is, could, where we are providing subsidised finance to, a bank or a lender to provide heat pump, battery, solar, can they then add on other products around that so that someone could do whole home retrofit? So they could provide a product for people to do whole home retrofit. Now, as I said, we might not end up there, but that's they're the sort of ambitious push for delivery that I'm trying to get from this work through the Green Finance Institute partnership.
What are some of those lessons that have been learnt from previous schemes that you want to avoid?
Oh, where to begin? Like there's some really good stuff. There's some things. For example, in the green loans under the coalition government, there were some good things around assessments and providing people with off-the-shelf assessments to enable them to very quickly understand what they needed to do with their homes. In terms of that, that worked successfully, but we're still picking up the pieces on some of these products. And also in terms of the consumer protection landscape around it, we have a separate process ongoing at the moment around improving consumer protection. Again, we have a retrofit advisory panel that's providing lots of really good quality advice to the department on that, and we will consult on exactly what that might look like hopefully around the summer. But we need to get the consumer protection right, because what I don't want and what we need to avoid at all costs is consumer loans or anything else we're doing turning into another version of eco, because we've seen the damage that caused, and many people in this room will have read the NEO report and the level of failure in that scheme. That's not to say that there weren't good installers doing good work, but there's a lot in there that we need to learn from to make sure that can never happen again. So the consumer protection piece around any of this is going to be absolutely crucial.
How do you think things will look different for consumers when you've moved forward on consumer protection? What should it feel like from a consumer perspective?
When we had the first thing that landed on my desk on week one when I took this job was the draft of the NEO report on eco, and it was bluntly jaw-dropping to have that level of failure in the system, 98% of failure in solid wall insulation. I think when you encounter something like that, the first question you're asking is how did this happen? And I think between the NEO report and the PAC, and also the work the department's done, I think we've answered that question about how it happened, and so we'll learn the lessons for how it won't happen again. But when I responded to that report in the House of Commons, we set out a number of conditions for how the future system should work. Largely, firstly, it shouldn't go wrong to begin with. It should be right first time. Consumers should be able to get quick redress, and I think that's one of the challenges in the system at the moment. Is if we are asking people to do complicated things with their homes, where it does go wrong, they need to know where to go to get redress, and too often they're having to work their way through a really complicated system of different providers, different guarantee providers to actually get that redress. So that has to be really simple and straightforward. So that's what I want to see coming out of the future system that we're developing on consumer protection. And as I said, we've got the retrofit advisory panel that's looking at this, and we'll consult more widely on it in the summer.
That's really interesting. I think one of the things that I picked up from the NAO report that really struck me, as well as the scale of the issue, was around the idea that people who'd got measures through ECO often didn't feel they were able to raise problems because they got the work for free. Like it would seem ungrateful, or even that people had told them they couldn't. You got it for free, don't complain. Yeah. How can we give people the agency to say, actually, you deserve something that works?
That is a really good question. I think that really goes deeper, I think, even than just how people interact with these schemes. I think that's about how, in a lot of these communities that we're working in, when we're working with often low-income communities who might have the least agency and the least voice, I think where there are organisations alongside them working on advice and guidance, advocacy organisations working alongside them, that's often how you get the best outcomes. But we do need to empower people all the way through this. People shouldn't feel, if someone is going into their home to make an improvement, no one should feel in any of these schemes like this is something that's been done to them. Like, they should be actively making a choice, engaging with it, and if they're not able to do that on their own, there should be someone holding their hand through that process. And I think that's actually where we work very effectively in the capital schemes that the department has far more oversight of. And so when I say we're learning lessons from ECO, it's not that we're having to look elsewhere or outside of the department. A lot of the lessons that we're learning are from other schemes that the department is running, where that there is agency there. There are local authorities working at a local level alongside people. There are far clearer routes for redress when things go wrong. So I think that's where we've really got to learn.
Brilliant, thanks. I mean, you've mentioned local authorities, so that's a nice segue into the relationship with local government, and also your thoughts about how delivery will happen in practice. I think the Warm Homes Plan itself set a direction here, but didn't give much detail on what delivery landscape could look like and what the role of local authorities might be. So tell us how your thinking is developing.
So I suppose two things on that. Firstly, I was a local councillor before I was an MP, and in any of anything I've been involved in government, often my default is to look and think, how do we move this out to local government? How do we devolve it? Because especially when you're dealing with something like these schemes, the local authority will have a much better idea than anyone in Whitehall ever will about how to deliver in their own areas, because more often than not, they're living in those areas, they are residents, they are working daily with people who you're trying to reach. So I think that's the first thing, is that the approach has to be pro-devolution and pro-local government, and understanding the benefit that comes from that. I think the second thing I would say is, obviously, with the two schemes, the Warm Home Local Grant, Warm Home Social Housing Fund that we've already got, and they've been working very effectively, but we're listening to what people have told us about them and integrating them from 2028. And I'm really keen that we co-design that new scheme with partners in local government. Again, it shouldn't be a Whitehall knows best. We're going to come up with the scheme and we're going to tell you how it's going to run. We should co-design that with local government. So in that vein, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, I think the work has to be done on how we deliver from 2028, and I want to be doing that with local authorities. But you've already seen, for example, benefits of this with what we've done through integrated settlements with some of the Merrill areas. We get a lot more out of it when we're working. Look at what we're doing with the Manchester Combined Authority at the moment. They're doing things that we wouldn't be able to achieve just by DESNES directing capital schemes from the centre. And we just need to do more of that in what we're doing at the back end of the Parliament.
Thanks. And in terms of the relationship between government and central government and local government, how are you imagining that might work, and where does the Warm Homes Agency fit into that picture?
So the Warm Homes Agency, just to kind of, didn't speak a lot about that in the remarks, but the Warm Homes Agency is there to bring the UK more in line with where the rest of Europe is on these things. Like most countries in Europe have something that looks like the Warm Homes Agency in order to coordinate this work, and we've been quite far behind on that for a number of years. So for those of you who might not know, the Warm Homes Agency will take parts of DESNZ that are dealing with schemes, parts of Ofgem and all of Salix, and collapse them all under one roof into the Warm Homes Agency. It will provide direct advice and guidance to consumers, but it will also provide a sort of knowledge sharing capacity for local government, for installers, for the industry more generally. And we are not looking to override or replicate what local government is already doing really, really well. So if you take, for example, in West Yorkshire, they've recently launched a really great home energy advice service. I would imagine in those sort of circumstances that the Warm Homes Agency would be pointing towards where there is good localised advice and guidance and not trying to just replicate that. But what we do need to do is make sure that there's a standard across the country that regardless of where you are in the UK, you're able to get the advice and guidance that you absolutely need. It shouldn't just be for those places where it maybe has an innovative mayor who's taken this forward. So I think in terms of how we're working with local authorities, my message to the mayors when I've spoken to them about this is we're not looking to run roughshod over you. We're not looking to replicate anything you're already doing really, really well. This is about providing a kind of a floor for everyone across the UK so that everyone who's engaging with retrofit has somewhere to go, and signposting to those really brilliant local authority advice services that exist in certain parts across the country.
So it's going to be consumer facing to some
Absolutely,
extent.
yeah, it will be consumer. It's not just consumer facing, it will also have a role, like I said, for industry and for knowledge sharing for example, local authorities who are running these schemes on our behalf.
Is central government well placed to play that role? Where have you seen that working well in other areas?
Well, it's funny. Like if you take, for example, and it's not to say that we'll be delivering all of this. Like there may be a role for the third sector, there might be a role for the voluntary sector in it, but we need to. Gov.uk is one of the first places that people go for advice on this sort of stuff already. So we need to make sure that if people land on gov.uk, for example, via the Warm Homes Agency, that there's good quality advice. And we're already doing some of this, and there's tools being developed within DESNZ that will roll out over the course of this year before we even get to the Warm Homes Agency. But I think it's just really important to emphasise we're not looking to replicate good work that's already been done across the country. It's about providing everyone with a front door that they can go through to be, in some cases, just signposted onto their own local area for better advice.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask 2 or 3 more short questions and then come to the audience, so do think what you want to ask the Minister. I wanted to go on to workforce issues and mention installers who are really at the front line of delivering these technologies into homes. Often feel overlooked in policy conversations, and I'd like to say, what would you say to installers, if they're working in gas or oil, why should they get on board with low carbon technologies in homes?
Look, the installers are going to be for a lot of people, they are going to be the gateway to information and advice on upgrades. So we absolutely need to work with the installers. I think the work that Nesta's done with gas installers is really, really important, because for most people making a decision about how they're going to heat their home, it's going to be their gas engineer who comes out and services their boiler that they're going to have their first conversation with. So we absolutely need to be working with them, because they are often the front door for a lot of these decisions. But I think for those who are already in the industry, I think many of them will see that the future is going in one particular direction. But what I'm really struck by when I go and do visits to colleges and to training centres is that the young people who are starting out in this industry really get that, and they understand that it's not necessarily a choice of I'm going to be a gas engineer or I'm going to be a heat pump engineer. They can do both, and in many cases they are training to do both in order that they can service gas boilers at the moment and also be equipped to be able to install a heat pump further down the line. So, I think for those who have been in the industry for a very long time, we absolutely need to work with them, but we also need to make sure that for those younger people who are coming through, they understand what the future might look like, not even the future, what things might look like in 5, 10, 15 years, and be able to give them the certainty that if they train, for example, as a heat pump engineer, that there's going to be work for them going forward over the next couple of decades.
And how can you give that certainty, given political cycles are short?
That's always going to be challenging, but I think the point of the Warm Homes Plan, the point of having this plan and being able to say, here's the trajectory that we are looking at over the next 5 to 10 years, I think that's where we try and provide certainty. But I don't think, like everything I've said tonight, it can't just fall to those of us in government to do this. I think everyone in this room, everyone who cares about this has a responsibility as well to make sure that people understand that where the direction of travel is, and we need to kind of work together collectively on that.
I wanted to just change tack a little bit and ask about, and we've talked about local authorities, but what about the relationship between UK government and the devolved governments? How do you see that working on this agenda? And obviously we've got elections coming up in Scotland and Wales.
Yeah, I'm in a very odd position that I'm an MP for a Scottish constituency working in a policy area that is largely only affecting England. So that is devolved implications are something that I think about most days. We've got a really good relationship with the devolved governments, and I think at the moment, certainly when you think about Wales and Scotland, who we obviously have more interaction with, because obviously Northern Ireland's in a slightly different position, but Wales and Scotland, we are broadly aligned in the direction of travel that we're going in, regardless of whether in some cases we might have some political disputes every now and then. We are all broadly moving in the same direction. Now, there's obviously elections coming up in the next few months. I think the character of some of those administrations might change, and then we're going to have to work out after that how we move forward. I think there's a real challenge in this whole area at the moment, which for everyone in this room, you'll understand this. I don't think we've ever really had a point where, energy is always a contested space. It's even more contested now than I think any of us would have thought it would have been 4 or 5 years ago. But I think the fact that we're talking tonight about the Warm Homes Plan, we're not talking about, major macro international energy issues. And this is actually the space that's probably the most contested. And we've seen in other countries how some of the issues that we're discussing tonight become almost the front line in some of these discussions, some of these political debates. And I think we need to always have in our head, and I've always got in my head, that no matter how much some of the political opposition might try and use this to divide people, that the vast majority of people, and you can see this in the public polling, support the action that we are taking. So I think there's 2 lessons from that. I think one is we can't be cowed because it's a difficult area. We need to have the argument. We need to lean into having the argument, and we shouldn't be afraid of having the row. And 2, we need to just always remember that the public are on our side and want us to be doing this. They want us to be thinking about the transition, and they want us to be thinking about the kind of things that we've put in this Warm Homes Plan.
Great. Last question from me. You hinted at this earlier. Organisations like Nesta, maybe some of these in the room, we ask a lot of government. We want you to listen to us, but and I'm sure you'll get questions where that people want to know what you can do for them. What would you like us to do for you? How would you like industry, manufacturers, energy suppliers, community organisations, consumer-facing organisations, innovation charities? What would you like to see from us?
I think some of the work you've done already is excellent, and just doing more of what you're already doing is great. Like some of the work you're doing with gas engineers, some of what you just you showed me upstairs in terms of some of the models that you're working on, incredible. But I'll maybe go back to the previous answer that I just gave. We all need to be out making the argument, because this is a contested space. None of what we're discussing tonight happens by accident. It happens because, bluntly, political choices have been made to take us in this direction. And political choices can cut multiple different ways, especially after elections and after different governments take office. But what we've done in this is to make a really, really strong political choice. And I think it's for all of us to make that case and if I'm asking you in this room to help us, it's go out and make that case and explain to people why this is important.
Thank you. Right, audience questions. I'll take 3 from this side first and then 3 from that side. Over here first. Oh. Yes, do say your name and where you come from and your question. Sorry, Peter, I don't think we can hear you very well. Hold on.
Hello. There we go.
Perfect.
Great. Peter Griffin from Regen. There's an elephant in the room, which is bills, and particularly the spark gap. So it's not surprising it's the first question, really. there seems to be, the government seems to be determined to make our life harder here. You know, we're running uphill. We're saying this is great technology, which it is. It's going to lower your bills. It's going to improve things, but it's not doing enough because of the taxation system and the markets and various aspects. So it feels like there's been some opportunities dodged. The budget gave us some headroom. We could have done more policy rebalancing then, and still everyone bills going down. Warm Homes discount moved to the off the standing charge. That's made it worse. So is the government serious on this and going to tackle that, or are we going to carry on running uphill?
Thank you. Just, this one, white jacket, thank you.
I'm just going to go actually on the same subject. I represent, my name's Sarah, I represent MEMA, which is the mineral wool insulation manufacturers. We represent non-combustible insulation. We are British manufacturers, British jobs, Wales, Warrington, up in Scotland, as well in Stirling. We are investing heavily in this country, billions. But it's a very challenging environment for us. We are a heat demand reducer. That's what insulation is. We really welcome the Minister's commitment, your commitment to consumer protection, but do you want to make sure that actually all the tech and measures that go into homes actually work? They do as they say on the tin. And would you actually look at embedding real performance, the meter measuring and monitoring of performance of all those measures and tech, insulation, heat pumps, solar PV, so actually the consumer get those real benefits. They get those genuinely lower heating bills and lower carbon. So they actually have that trust and confidence that what they end up with at the end of the day are those lower bills and lower carbon, warm, comfortable homes.
Thanks, Sarah. And just behind, next row. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Alex Thomas from Worcester Bosch. Has the government had the chance to look at hybrid heating case study at Salford University? And is the change from fossil fuels to heat pumps too much of a leap or disruption to the consumer and costs? And will consumers adopt to change if we have a more gradual approach? Just interesting to see your view on the skills side of things that might help with training from gas and integrating into heat pumps as well, and how that challenges will be.
Okay, thank you. So we've got the spark gap.
Yeah.
Thank you for raising that. It's a bit like bingo. Insulation, but also the role of monitoring the effectiveness of technologies and other measures in homes, and the role of hybrids, if any.
Great. So just to peter on bills and the spark gap, we've obviously taken decisions in the budget that has reduced the spark gap. I'm not going to pretend that it's done everything. It obviously hasn't. But we took that action to have that rebalancing within the budget last year. I think like everything I'm discovering since I've been doing this job since September, is that the trade-offs involved in this are often very, very challenging. And I think in anything that we're doing to reduce the price of electricity, we also have to make sure that we're not just simply loading cost onto the gas bill, especially at a point in time when we have the challenge with rising bills across the piece, and we have the challenge with our exposure to gas, that we can't just load costs from one part of the bill onto another. So we will continue to examine, and we want to reduce the spark gap further, but we have to make sure that we do that in a way that's fair to all bill payers. But as I said, I think it's important to remember we have already taken action in the budget to rebalance. And on the point around some of this technology, like we know that with the right technology mix, the right tariff, people can already make savings and can make savings with, for example, heat pump, solar, battery. The archetype that we've given in the Warm Homes Plan is a sort of mid-terrace with those three technologies and a time of use tariff. You can probably bring your bills down by about £300 or £400. So savings can be made with the technologies that exist at the moment, but totally take the point. We obviously need to go further, but we need to make sure we're doing that in a way that is fair to everyone. On Sarah's point, thank you for the work that you do in the UK, and thank you for the investment that you're bringing into the UK. I think it's really important that consumers have as much information as possible about the effectiveness. I know that's something that we're always looking at in terms of products and product standards. So happy to potentially have a conversation after this about anything more that you think we can be doing to look at that. Alex, on hybrid heating, part of, I think, our approach to this is the government's obviously made a decision to prioritise in terms of our investment where we put government resource into heat pumps. That's not to belittle or sideline other technologies, and obviously the technologies that we look at have been changing over the years. So, the boiler upgrade scheme is now available to other technologies now that weren't available 2 years ago. So we'll obviously always look at the latest technology and whether there's support that we can give. But what we wouldn't want to do is put government funding into supporting technologies that maybe act as a stepping stone but don't get us to where we need to get to. It's obviously it's for consumers to make their choices. Consumers can make a choice to go for hybrid heating at the moment if they want to, but the question for me as a government minister thinking about where government resource should be deployed is what is it we want to incentivise, and the choice that we've made is to incentivise the purchase of heat pumps and some of the other technologies that are available through the Warm Homes Plan. Just on the training point, the reason why we've set up the TUC Workforce Task Force is to examine all of these issues in great detail. That's not to say we're kicking it into the long grass. There's obviously a lot of work that was already in the Warm Homes Plan in terms of funding that's available for training already, work that we're doing through schemes and in other areas. But the TUC work is also looking specifically at, for example, how do we reskill the gas workforce for an environment in which there may be less gas and more heat pumps, and they're examining that as part of this 18-month task force that we've got running with them.
Thank you. Let's take three from this side. In the front row, in a lovely black and white dress.
Thank you. I'm Kate Gilmartin. I wear various hats, but today I'm here with my volunteer hat on with Community Benefit Society, Rossendale Valley Energy, that's been driving forward for 5 years now, the Net Zero Terrace Streets project, which was actually a case study in the Warm Homes Plan, which was fantastic. So we're looking at street-by-street decarbonisation in totality, so shared ground loop, retrofit, smart solar storage, smart systems, smart water cylinder, and the smart local energy system that sits on top of that. So 2 points, really, two-stroke questions. We are a community benefit society with a local development organisation that is trusted within our community. And you mentioned that already about agency and advocacy, really, really important if we're going to work with low-income communities that don't have high levels of trust. So I've not really seen that in the Warm Homes Plan. How do we bring forward the community organisations? Because they are your land army. We want to dig for Britain, you need a land army. And these are the people on the ground who are going to do the work. And I think Local Power Plan's done that pretty well. It's using the delivery architecture of community energy groups to fill that gap, because we know there's a really big gap between policy intent and deployment, and the bridge can be those community organisations. So that's one question. The other question is, we're doing a lot of work on smart local energy systems, because we know if you're going to roll out a load of technologies...
On what? Sorry, say that again.
Smart local energy systems. So if you're going to put a load of low carbon technology on a street, you're essentially going to constrain your local feeder and your local substation. So at the moment, we're saying to DNO, we're working with SPENW to say, OK, well, we're doing a Strategic Innovation Fund project to look at what that needs to be. But we can't just think we can roll out loads of kit without constraining our local network, because we will. So it's about doing a twin track approach. It's the delivery architecture, but it's going to be people that enable that delivery, but also the technical delivery as well in terms of the network.
That's good. James, since I know who you are.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Madeleine. I'm James Dyson from E3G. And I think, Martin, you've already alluded to the bashing that Net Zero has taken in the past few weeks, and I'd argue that that's because Net Zero had a very superficial level of support, and it's failed to pick up and bring the most of society along with it. And on the homes agenda, upfront costs remain the main reason why people don't get solar panels, heat pumps, or a battery. And although that I know that there are policies in the Warm Homes Plan that will make it easier for some households, I'd probably argue that after Eco4 was cut and that the main mechanism, the main driver to get measures into people's homes was removed, you're now missing a policy to make the Warm Homes policy go bang for your absolutely average household or below low income. And so I'd put it to you, but what policy do you think will really push that forward? And perhaps looking inwardly to Madeleine's last question, third sector and sort of our organisation are really going to look at how we can push electrification forward and agenda in a positive sort of way to support that for you. But from you, we would need to see a way to bring upfront costs down to make solar batteries, heat pumps accessible to your average or low-income household.
Thank you. One more in the back row. Thank you.
Good evening. Ben Richards from Kingfisher, better known as B&Q and Screwfix. Very interested in the Minister's view in the able-to-pay market and the kind of more the consumer journey. So kind of two sides to that, really. The first is around, you mentioned finance and opening up to that, but also a lot of consumers make decisions around when they buy and sell their homes. So, of course, they're ripping out a kitchen. What else are they doing? Where are they going? So the involvement that the Warm Homes Plan can draw other parts of the system in. You go to other countries in Europe, you'll find a heat pump in a home improvement retailer and they'll be selling them in there. So there's a different kind of structure. The second thing is, I hope also on your desk is the EPC reform, which I think has been mentioned already this evening, which is the kind of document that people look to, but it doesn't have things like what is the installation like. It has just a very simple measure, so it doesn't give them that signposting to then turn to their tradesperson, whomever they go to get their home improved. Thank you.
So bringing down upfront costs, EPC reform, the role of the wider home improvement sector. We've got a lot of questions here for 3 questions. How do we bring forward more community organisations and build up their role, and how can we help facilitate smart local energy systems?
Great, thank you. And apologies if I missed anything, but please just grab me at the end if I don't cover absolutely everything. Kate, I've read about what you are doing in Rosendale. It is excellent, and it is a model for what we should be looking at across the country. I think you sort of answered the question, I think, towards the end of what you said, in that I don't think we shouldn't look at the Warm Homes Plan in isolation. There's obviously a lot of different work the department's doing, and the local power plan, I think, is setting out the role of organisations such as yours and others and how we build that. I'm going to steal that line about the land army and how we build that land army. I think on the technical points around the constraints on the grid, this is why the Warm Homes Plan, and we're looking in further detail at the moment about what is the role of DNOs as we roll this out, because not just for the reasons that you mentioned, but also because we know that area-based rollout that has maybe local authorities or others as a kind of strategic voice alongside DNOs, working alongside on delivery is could be very effective, and I think would help dealing with some of the technical challenges that you're finding. I think one other thing I would just say in terms of how we're involving organisations such as yours, a lot of this, again, and I'm not trying to swerve responsibility, but this is why we need to work with local authorities, because the local authorities will have the best sense of who are the local organisations we need to work with, and make sure that you're involved from day one in those projects and schemes, which is why we are so conscious of that role of local authorities and making sure that they're brought along with us in absolutely everything that we're doing. James, I think what you said, I think that's a really good challenge, frankly. I think that is a really good challenge to not just myself, but others, I think, in the room around taking those 2 points in turn. Firstly, on the support for net zero, I don't know if I would be as sceptical that it was superficial. Like, I think that I'm going to sound like I'm being very cagey here, but it depends how you ask the question. Because if you say to someone, and you'll know this more than others in the room, but if you ask someone, do you support net zero, especially now in the context that we're living through, you're probably not going to get a very good response. If you ask people about the individual measures within the Warm Homes Plan and some of the support that we're offering and what government's trying to achieve through it, you get a much, much more positive response. And I think there is a challenge for us in terms of how we communicate this, how we make the case. But again, it's not just, I don't think it's just for government to make that case. And actually, in some cases, myself, Ed, other members of the ministerial team are not going to be the best people to make the case to the people that we need to win over. It could be people in this room, it could be others. I'd go back to that example that I gave in the remarks, just about it could be someone talking to their neighbours and friends, and we need to work out how to best use those kind of softer networks to make the argument. On the point around eco, by the end of that scheme, in some cases, people were spending more money trying to find the people to give to provide the measures to than we were providing the measures. And so, not just from a value for money point of view, that's obviously not a good use of public money, but from a fuel poverty point of view, and for any of us who care about, I'm assuming everyone in this room who cares about lifting people out of fuel poverty, why would we deploy into a scheme that was spending so much money just trying to find the people? It wasn't effective. Now, the decision to remove eco obviously has consequences which we're now dealing with, but it also came with 1.5 billion of more capital into DESNZ, which we're now deploying through some of the local government schemes. You'll have seen the announcement that Ed made on Sunday around money to funding to a number of the mayoral combined authorities, and I think that's what we were able to do because we don't have eco. We can put that money straight through the capital grant schemes into local authorities. So it is a good challenge, but the money on the table for low income households is still really, really significant in this, and I would argue that money is going to go a lot further than it was going through the eco scheme. And just the final question on, so I've lost my note, on colleague from Ben from Kingfisher. I think this speaks to how we make it easier for people to engage with this whole market. Like, it sometimes feels like we're at risk of overcomplicating how people engage with it. Now, I would love someone to be able to walk into a high street shop and see a heat pump and be able to purchase it in that, in that way. And that's probably what we need to aim for. Similarly, we need to also look at the points at which people, are going to be making these decisions, whether it's when they move home, whether it's when their boiler breaks down, maybe they're remortgaging and they're considering whether to take a little bit more on their mortgage. We need to work out how best at those decision points to reach people, to make it as easy for them as possible to make the sort of decisions that we would like to see them make. And I think that's the only way we're ever going to have success in this area, is that it shouldn't be, as I've said a number of times, it shouldn't be top down, we're telling you to do this. It shouldn't be compelling people, other in some cases, to do it. Where it comes to the able to pay market, it should be making it as easy as possible and as ideally cheap as possible for people to make the decisions to use this new technology to retrofit their homes, to install a heat pump. And I think there's probably a lot more work, and this is probably something for me to reflect on, just in the same way that we're working with high street lenders and banks on consumer loans. Do we need to be doing more work with the retail sector? I think that is a really good question that honestly I haven't actually really thought about before now, but that is something that we probably need to look at. How do we work with the retail sector to make sure that all of this is as accessible as possible?
Are there any questions online?
Yeah, we've got one here from Laura McGady, who says, what are the plans to improve the quality of installation so that the number of consumers having to seek redress is minimised?
Thank you. Let's just take that one because we're actually almost at time.
We're almost out of time.
Yeah.
So I would go back to what I said earlier about how we're improving the consumer protection landscape. I would hope that improves things significantly once we have a new approach to consumer protection. But I think the important thing to remember with insulation, notwithstanding the problems in eco, is properly installed, it can be very effective. So, there's been some accusations around the Warm Homes Plan that we're moving away from fabric, we're not talking about insulation. Insulation still has a really big part to play in terms of retrofit and energy efficiency. It's in the Warm Homes Plan, it's being deployed through our capital schemes, and it's being deployed very effectively through capital schemes, and that's not going to change. Where there's an emphasis on technology, again, because things are changing and we need to make sure that people have access to the tech that normally only those with deep pockets have been able to access. We're not moving away from insulation. I'm confident with the correct oversight, as we have in the capital grant schemes and with the right consumer protection landscape, that can be deployed very effectively.
Brilliant. we're at time, so I'm going to wrap it up. I just wanted to ask 2 very quick questions to finish off. First of all, you've given us a great overview of the Warm Homes Plan and some of the work that's been underway since its publication, but there's still a lot of work to do. How can we be confident that we'll get to clarity on things like the role of local authorities, arrangements for local delivery, and so on? And then finally, what makes you optimistic that we can be successful in this over the next few years?
On the confidence, I think you should take confidence from the fact that I'm sat here tonight saying that we are working at pace on delivery, and everything I am doing now, it's not about policy development, it's all about delivery. And as I said at the outset, every 2 weeks we're sitting down with the team to look at how all of these work streams are progressing, and they are progressing at pace. And I'm confident, even just on the local government capital schemes, even though we've got the redesign of the new scheme for 2028, we're still deploying now. We've just funded through the integrated settlements, we've just announced more funding. That delivery is happening alongside the development that we need to continue doing. What makes me optimistic? I think a funny way to answer this, but what's happening in the Middle East at the moment is once again bringing into the spotlight why we need to be moving at pace on this entire agenda, and why we need to make sure that we are moving away from volatile fossil fuels, and why we need to work at pace on the delivery of the Warm Homes Plan. But what fundamentally makes me optimistic is I think we're on the right side of this argument. And I think the public are with us on this argument, and not just when I have conversations with constituents in my own constituency, but also when you look at the public polling, you can see that people are with us on this. Now, are they going to agree with absolutely everything we're doing, on every measure all the time? No. But are we broadly taking people in the right direction? Yes, and we can carry on doing that, and I'm confident we can do that. I'll leave you with one final story. I was on Radio 4 on Sunday morning doing the broadcast round, and Paddy O'Connell was barracking me about saying, don't pretend you're not on Radio 4, pretend that you're talking to one of your constituents about solar panels. And I was able to say to him, yesterday I was on the doorstep with a constituent who had just installed solar panels on our garage roof, and was able to say to me, this is exactly how much I have saved. This is exactly the difference it has made to me. And I am overwhelmed by the number of visits that I've done in this role, constituents I've spoken to, who can turn around and actually get their spreadsheets up on their phones and show me exactly how much they've saved. And that's that is what is making me optimistic about this, that people can see the benefit. They will talk to their friends, they will talk to their family, and they are going to be the best advocates for what we're trying to achieve.
Great. Nice point to end on a spreadsheet. I also have one showing how much I've saved. I can show you later. I was going to wrap up by plugging some of Nesta's work, but you've done that for me. Thank you, Minister. That was very kind. So instead, I'll just say, I hope you're going to stay around for some drinks. I know there would be lots of questions you'd like to ask the Minister that you didn't have a chance to do. I hope you're sticking around for 15 minutes. So get straight in there. Some of my colleagues are here to ask about our work. We also have a demonstration of our new heat planning tool on the screen at the back of the room. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you for those who joined us online, and hope to see you at a Nesta event soon.
Thank you.